the story. Goodness gracious. I do not appreciate when that happens. I don't know if it was my phone overheating perhaps, but it shouldn't have happened like that. But here I am. Somebody post the link in the other chat. My goodness, anyway, maybe the government doesn't like me talking about this. Let me emphasize before I continue with the story. I am not in any way encouraging anyone to do this kind of thing. And in fact, I am telling you the opposite, that doing this kind of behavior is detrimental to the revolutionary movement. I would say that people engaging in this kind of activism hurts, it hurts the revolutionary movement more than anything. This kind of behavior, it isolates revolutionary groups. I am 100% opposed to left adventurism and all illegal activity. I encourage people to engage in legal, peaceful activism, for goodness sakes. But for some reason, these young people, it was 1969, 1970, they thought this was what was the thing to do. And no wink, wink there. I'm deadly serious. I mean, if you look at the history that I'm about to tell you, you'll understand why I am totally opposed to this kind of thing. No wink, wink. Someone in the chat said wink, wink. I'm disagreeing with you. No, this kind of activity is completely counterproductive. And it destroyed, like I said, they went from a group of millions of people to a group of 2,000 people to a group of 30 people, okay? They destroyed, there was a mass activist group of 2 million people that were potentially communists. They absolutely destroyed the organization. And then they did a bunch of crazy terrorism that ultimately made people think revolutionaries and leftists are a bunch of violent, crazy terrorists. But anyway, what had happened was, I guess after their days of rage failed in 1969, and that wasn't the first battle in the revolution, they decided that this was because of, they didn't call it this, but it was because of white privilege, right? It's average Americans are just too bought off by imperialism. Average Americans are pigs who benefit from empire too much. And so, it's not possible to have a revolution in the United States. So they basically argued the only thing that they could do to deal with their white guilt and, show that they were good white people, while all the other ones are monsters, was to engage in these symbolic bombings. It was the height of, ultra-leftist, Maoist, third worldist, anti-working class, privileged politics thinking, basically, is what it was, right? They gave up on the American working class. They said the American working class are not revolutionary, could never be revolutionary. So we, a bunch of rich kids from billionaire and millionaire families, we're gonna engage in terrorism to make ourselves the good guys. China market sector reined in. That was basically their feeling. And they engaged for about a decade. They did bombing campaigns. David Gilbert was one of these people, and so was Bernardine Dorn and Bill Ayers, and there's a bunch of them. They blew themselves up at one point. They had a townhouse, a building in Manhattan, and they blew themselves up. It was, they were making a bomb, and when they were trying to make their bomb, they blew themselves up, and it was whatever. It was this group of very, very wealthy kids who had abandoned and given up on the American working class and decided they were going to do this ultra-left adventurism thing. One of them was David Gilbert. So David Gilbert, eventually, as the decade goes on, Richard Nixon is impeached. Jimmy Carter becomes president, and for some reason, and this is where it gets really shady, and this is a lot of people that talk about this history, they don't go here, all right? Because this points to there being more to this story than we really know about. I will go here. I'm not ashamed to go here. But here's what happened next. So about 1978, 79, Jimmy Carter is going to leave office. And somehow, the Weathermen got offered a deal. All right, Bill Ayers, Bernardine Dorn, they all got offered some kind of deal that if they will surrender and turn themselves in, they don't go to prison. Because the FBI tortured some of their relatives. That's true. The FBI dangled one of their relatives by his ankles from a building. I think it was Bill Ayers' brother, in order to try and find out where the Weathermen were, they apparently took Bill Ayers' brother and dangled him out of the window by his ankles, threatening to drop him if he didn't tell him where they were. They did a lot of other things. They pretended to be relatives. There was a whole lot of police misconduct, okay? There was a lot of police misconduct in trying to catch these people. So, as Jimmy Carter was was getting ready to leave office, somehow they got the message: if you turn yourselves in now, no jail time. Now, keep in mind, these people bombed government buildings, like the Capitol building, like the Pentagon. They never killed anybody. Now, they always made sure to call in the threat ahead of time and didn't kill anybody, but goodness gracious. I mean, these people, you want to talk about illegal things that one could expect to go to prison for a very, very long time for doing. These people, that's just boomer generation. Last hope. These people, they certainly did things that one would expect to go to jail for. But, they were all from very, very wealthy families, and there are more conspiracy theories than that. Apparently, there were some informers in the group, that there were some FBI informers in the group the whole time, which doesn't make any sense, because if the FBI was diligently looking for them, why was there an informer in the group? And a lot of things that don't add up. All right. Writing it down. A lot of things that don't add up, regardless of all that stuff that doesn't make any sense and doesn't add up. Socialism, Tame the Hood. All this stuff that doesn't add up. They all basically got told, hey, you turn yourselves in 1978, 1979, we'll drop all the charges, basically. So they did. Bill Ayers turned himself in. Bernadine Dohrn turned herself in. A bunch of them, they turned themselves in. And somehow they admitted to doing all kinds of crazy illegal things, but managed to not go to prison. Now, that's a little bit shady. But there was a division in the group. They didn't all agree that they should take the deal. Okay? Bill Ayers took the deal. Bernadine Dohrn took the deal. David Gilbert did not take the deal. Okay? Marilyn Buck did not take the deal. There's somebody else. I can't remember her name. She didn't take the deal either. There are a few others that did not take the deal. So the Weather Underground was dissolved, and they turned themselves in. The ones who did not take the deal, they called themselves the May 19th Communist Organization. The May 19th Communist Organization, and some of them started calling themselves the Revolutionary Armed Task Force, and they entered a united front with the Black Liberation Army, which was an armed group that broke away from the Black Panthers and was also engaging in bombings. And they continued doing left adventurous terrorism. And David Gilbert was part of the Revolutionary Armed Task Force, and he ended up, I don't remember the details of exactly. I think it was that they robbed a bank truck or something and killed somebody or something. The ones who didn't turn themselves in, when they got caught, they, gave them really, really long sentences. They, buried them under the jail, practically. You're done, right? You're done. And a lot of them died in prison. They just, the ones who didn't take the deal, they were done. And they were carrying out armed attacks in coordination with the Black Liberation Army. I think they did kill some police officers, if I'm not mistaken. They killed at least a security guard for a Brinks truck, like a bank cash-carrying truck. And, yeah. Well, David Gilbert is one of those people. And so David Gilbert, he'd been in prison in New York. We don't have the death penalty in New York, so they weren't going to execute him. But he was in prison. They're never going to let him out. 73-year sentence. That's who David Gilbert is, right? And he's white, and he's a white guy, and he's in prison somewhere in upstate New York, and he figures he's never getting out because 73-year sentence, and he's never going to be heard from again. And they did get an interview with him for some of these documentaries that have come out. They've interviewed him from, behind bars. He sits there with his prison uniform on. I think he published an autobiography from prison that people have read, and, some people find it very inspiring. I don't. Actually, I didn't really like his autobiography. I probably, of all the Weatherman's autobiographies I ever read, Mark Rudd's was probably the most honest. Honestly, Mark Rudd, politically is not as so good. I mean, he's, now is a supporter of Israel and such, but his autobiography was very, very easy to read and very to the point and very full of useful information about left-wing history and what political line and what tactics people were using. That's another story. But anyway, so David Gilbert, he's in prison, and he's in prison. So right before Andrew Cuomo stepped down, he granted clemency to David Gilbert. He didn't release him. He did not pardon him and did not release him. What he did was he reduced his prison sentence from 73 years to 40 years. That's what Andrew Cuomo did. He reduced the prison sentence of David Gilbert from 73 years to 40 years. What this does is this gives David Gilbert the right to a parole hearing, which he would not have had yet, because the way it works is you only get the possibility of parole up to a certain time before your sentence is up. So it appears that David Gilbert will now have the right to a parole board hearing because Governor Andrew Cuomo reduced his sentence. Now, what in the world could have possibly motivated Andrew Cuomo to do this? Now, we all know what Fox News is going to say. That's because Democrats are all communists. They're all traitors to America, and they're all communists, and vaccines are communism, and the USA is the Soviet Union, and Joe Biden's a Chinese puppet communist, and the commies Reds, I hate them. That's what the right wing is going to say, and that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. What's really going on here? What is really going on here? What's going on here is this. Andrew Cuomo has been in New York City politics his entire life. And he basically got forced out of office. And honestly, sexual harassment is never okay. Never. And I will never try to tell you that what he did was acceptable behavior. But a lot of people have looked at what Cuomo did and compared this to some of the really awful cases and said, he could have survived this, right? If there wasn't a real motivation to get him out of there, he could have survived this. But he didn't. He didn't even admit guilt, right? That's how flimsy the charges were. It was a couple people's story came forward. He talked to them in an inappropriate way that he shouldn't have done. But there's other people that have done such things, and there's a lot of questions. I would never try to tell you that what he did was okay. It was clearly not okay. And if anyone takes me out of context and says that I'm justifying Cuomo's behavior, you're lying, because I know it's wrong. I have a feeling he did everything he's accused of, but I also have a feeling that compared to what other people are accused of doing, this is not the most extreme example of sexual harassment we've seen. And that if there was not some kind of political motivation, he probably could survive this. But you'll notice Joe Biden called for him to leave. All of the New York City political establishment called for him to leave. Letitia James, who's the New York City, the New York State Attorney General, she called for him to leave. He left. Now, what is one organization that Andrew Cuomo, as the governor of the state of New York, has a relationship with? That would be the New York State Troopers. What is another organization that every New York politician at the state level, or the local level has to have something to do with and deal with? the New York City Police Department, the NYPD. And furthermore, who was it who issued the ultimate report that sunk Andrew Cuomo? Who was it? It was the district attorney, the district of attorney's office. It was the DA, right? The New York Attorney General, Letitia James, the prosecutors, the state prosecutorial wing. And who did the Black Liberation Army and the Revolutionary Armed Task Force go around shooting? Police officers. And it looks to me like Andrew Cuomo wanted to wag his middle finger, which I will not do because that's a crude gesture. He wanted to go and wag his middle finger at the police of this state. That's what it looks like to me. And honestly, that makes sense. Policing agencies in this country have way too much power. The NYPD is pretty clearly supporting Trump. The prosecutors, if you go to the courthouses in New York, even though this is an overwhelmingly Democratic city, all these prosecutors with Irish last names, who their father was a prosecutor, and their father was a prosecutor, and his father was a prosecutor, and we love to put people in jail. That's what we do for a living. And, New York City politics, those guys all support Donald Trump. They all think Black Lives Matter is a big, communist conspiracy because cops never do anything wrong, and it's all made up. And, the cops and the prosecutors, that wing of American politics has a lot of power. And it uses its power to destroy people's careers and lives. They've made Bill de Blasio, mayor of New York, they've made him say uncle about 100 times, right? Every time he wants to challenge them or something, they twist his arm and he goes, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. I mean, it's kind of sad. So it seems that Andrew Cuomo, he feels like he's been unjustly driven from office, and he's made that clear. He's made that overwhelmingly clear. He feels he's been unjustly driven from office. And he said, how can I just give him my middle finger before I go? How can I just make it abundantly clear how unfair I feel that I am being treated? How can I just make this abundantly clear? And it appears to me, he said, oh, there's some guy, some like left-wing activist or something who killed some police officers or whatever. Yeah, let's grant him clemency. And not even let him out, mind you, right? And he could do that. Governor Andrew Cuomo could easily say, hey, David Gilbert, you're out. You're done. He didn't do that, though. He was careful. But he just made a gesture through which David Gilbert will now be able to have parole hearings. Well, there you go. David Gilbert will now be able to have parole hearings because of New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo. So that's what's going on here. This shows why divisions in the ruling class are so important, right? I mean, here's somebody who's behind bars and could get out, right? And he could get out simply because one faction in the ruling class is trying to screw another faction in the ruling class. They're doing this just to... This shows things like this. Divisions in the ruling class are important. Now, what is my position? What is my position? Let me make my position abundantly clear so that no one takes this out of context, right? Because I'm talking about very sensitive subjects here, right? And I'm sure there's lots of people watching this that want to watch this and say, Caleb supports terrorism. No, I don't. A lot of people watching this want to say, oh, Caleb wants to imprison political prisoners. He's saying they're all... No. I will say what my position has been and has always been. This is my position, which is, 1, I oppose left adventurous terrorism. I favor a peaceful, democratic transition to socialism through the legal processes of the United States. I do not ever advocate what David Gilbert did, what these people did. I oppose what they did. If someone came to me and said, I'm going to do this, I would say, do not do that. And I think people doing that hurts the revolutionary movement, leads to the isolation of revolutionary forces. No one should be doing that. However, at the same time that I oppose everything these people did, they should all be free. They should all be free. There needs to be a blanket amnesty for all political prisoners. David Gilbert, Mumia Abu-Jamal, Leonard Peltier, blanket amnesty. You know why? Because the FBI killed all kinds of people. Fred Hampton was gunned down in his bed. People were given drugs and spiked with LSD. Law enforcement, they killed millions of people in Vietnam. Millions of black lives were destroyed. Every time there was an urban rebellion, they would send in the National Guard and they just start blowing people away, shooting people down on the streets. Algiers motel incident, no. Right? And these people are in jail for stuff that they did they shouldn't have done. Okay? They shouldn't have done what they did, right? Weatherman, they shouldn't have done that, right? Revolutionary Armed Task Force, they should not have done that. That hurt the revolutionary movement. But that said, the FBI ain't in jail. The National Guard that they sent in to shoot down black people that were rising up, they haven't been to jail. The MOVE bombing in Philadelphia where they firebombed a whole block to wipe out the MOVE organization. They're not in jail. So based on that, to heal the country from the hardship of that period, to heal the country from the political turmoil of those years, there needs to be a blanket amnesty. A blanket amnesty, right? In Northern Ireland, when the IRA and the British government signed the Good Friday Agreement, they freed the IRA political prisoners. They let them go. Now, did the British government say, oh, I guess they didn't do it? No. Did the IRA say, oh, I guess we shouldn't have done? No. It's just understanding that the country needed to move on. There needed to be healing in the country. And that these folks had done what they thought was the right thing in the context of a lot of violence and terrorism and brutality and torture from the other side. They thought this was the best way to respond, and they were wrong. But in order to heal the country, blanket amnesty. There needs to be a blanket amnesty. And if you're a politician, if there's any politicians watching this now, any members of Congress, any anti-CIA films, any members of Congress who are watching this now and all of that, if you really love America, if you really love this country, if you love the United States of America, you want to create a more perfect union, I don't condemn him. I did not condemn him. I said that he did the wrong thing. In order to create a more perfect union, they need to let these people go. They need to let David Gilbert out. They do. He needs to be paroled. He's done how many years? It's like 1980 is when he did what he did. They need to let David Gilbert out. Mumia Abu-Jamal, I believe Mumia Abu-Jamal is innocent. I don't think he did what he was charged with. But even if he did, based on everything that's gone on and all of that, they need to free Mumia Abu-Jamal. They need to free Leonard Peltier. They need to free all the MOVE 9, all the members of the MOVE organization. They need to free, Jamil Al-Amin. They need to just let these people out. That's what they need to do. They need to let these people out. And if you really love America, right, if you're worried about, the tension and Black Lives Matter and all this stuff that's been going on, you need to let these people out. Heal the wounds of the past, right? Keeping these people in jail does not help the country in any conceivable way. It doesn't. Keeping these people locked up only keeps the bitterness there, keeps the rage there, keeps the tension there. David Gilbert should be free. When that parole hearing comes up, they should say, David, you did something really bad a long time ago. You did something really bad. You shouldn't have done that. But that was a long time ago. Things have changed. We're now coming to terms with police brutality in this country. We all saw the video of George Floyd. Even Mitt Romney was marching for George Floyd. And, you were supporting the Black Liberation Army. You knew what was going on, what the police were doing. We all tried to ignore it. You thought what you were going to do, you thought what you did would help. Well, you were wrong. It didn't help. It actually made things a lot worse. But you miscalculated. You shouldn't have done that. You got locked away for 40, 50 years. Now your time is up, and they should let him out. They should let David Gilbert out. They should let Sundiata Acoli out. They should let Jamil Alamin out. They should let Leonard Peltier out. They should let Mumia Abu Jamal out. They let these people out. All the Puerto Rican, political prisoners, they should let them out, right? No, people, based on, and I cannot emphasize this enough, okay? Yes, what these people did, they shouldn't have done, okay? It hurt the revolutionary movement. But do you think what the FBI did was okay? Do you think the FBI taking their relatives and dangling them out of windows, do you think that was okay? You think that was okay? You think it was okay when the FBI, and they're not the FBI, but the Philadelphia police firebombed the Move House and just, burned an entire house full of people? You think that was okay? You think it was okay how they killed Fred Hampton? You think that was okay? You think that was okay? I'm sorry, do you think it was okay, you think it was okay when these urban rebellions would happen in Detroit and, every major city in the United States, 1968, had an urban rebellion in the aftermath of the killing of Dr. Martin Luther King, April 1968. The whole country went out in flames. They sent the army out into the streets and they boom, boom, they were just blowing people away. Do you think that's okay? You think that's okay? Obviously, it's not okay. A lot of people did a lot of bad things during this time. A lot of people did a lot of bad things during that time. Full amnesty needs to be given. Full amnesty needs to be granted to all political prisoners. That has always been my position, and that remains my position. We need a full amnesty for all the political prisoners in the United States. And folks, one of the most interesting events I've ever been to, and I was invited to speak at this event. I don't know how this happened, but there was a political prisoners benefit in Harlem, New York City. It was a political prisoners benefit, that was held in support of all political prisoners. Ramona Africa was there, and Pam Africa was there. Infinite growth. Pam Africa was there, and, I was invited. It was actually at the ballroom, the site where Malcolm X was assassinated. It was in the building, the Betty Shabazz Center in Harlem. And I spoke. I gave a very short speech, 5 minutes, to an audience full of veterans of that struggle. And I looked out on that audience, older folks, mainly African Americans, folks who, a lot of them were related to somebody who had been in the Black Liberation Army and was still locked up, or they knew somebody, or they'd been involved in, peaceful activism, but they had known somebody who went and did some illegal things. And it was an audience full of people who were there to support the people who were still locked up, from the Black Liberation Army, from, the Black Panthers, from the, National General Strike. All right. From the Black Panthers, from the Revolutionary Armed Task Force, from the May 19th, communist organization. And, this room, I looked out in this room full of older folks, mainly African Americans, some white people, but mainly African Americans. And I looked out on that room and I realized I was in a room full of war veterans. Right? This is a lot like, going to the VFW. This is a lot like, this is a lot like going to the American Legion. These are people who were in a very, very, very traumatic, very, 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 very traumatic moment together, bonded over it, believed in what they were doing, saw their comrades die and get shot down and killed, have, people on the inside that are still in prison doing time for what happened. And, and I thought, there's rooms like this in Ireland. There's rooms like this in South Africa. There's rooms like this in Palestine. This is a gathering of war veterans. This was a war. Right? The Black Liberation Movement of the 1960s. You read about COINTELPRO. You read about what happened to the Black Panthers. You read about what happened, this was a war. This was a war. This was like a war. And I was in a room full of war veterans. I mean, it's the room where Malcolm X was shot down, for goodness sakes. And there's a lot of information about U.S. government and how their involvement in psyching the Nation of Islam and the divisions and the anger and this is a war. This was a war, and these people have been through a lot. And it was really an honor, a deep honor, to be invited as a white person to this gathering. It was really an honor to be there, to be there. So, despite no endorsement of his politics or what he did, free David Gilbert. Free David Gilbert. Free David Gilbert. I hope his parole hearing goes well, and they say, let bygones be bygones, and never forget to pay attention to the divisions in the ruling class, right? Because again, David Gilbert now has the potential to be free because of divisions in the ruling class, right? That means something now, doesn't it? Doesn't it mean something that David Gilbert now has the free, the potential to walk free? I mean, the ruling class fighting among themselves. All right. Our Bonapartist and Reaganomics run amok. This shows how divisions in the ruling class can somehow create openings. Now, folks, one thing that I can't say enough is that I am not a grifter. I'm not, and I shouldn't have to tell you that. You should be able to tell that. And you know why? Because I'm about to say that was agenda item number 1. I talked about Gilbert and Cuomo. That was agenda item number 1. You think that's going to make me popular? No. And I'm about to hit you with another agenda item that's not going to make me popular. I don't tell people what I think they want to hear. I tell people what I think they need to hear. I have said many things on these broadcasts that I know folks online do not want to hear. Sorry, right? If I was just on here to make you feel good about yourself, I wouldn't be doing my job. I feel that I have a responsibility as someone who's been studying Marxism and revolutionary politics, someone who's traveled around the world. I have a responsibility to be real with you and tell you not what you want to hear, but what you need to hear. Okay? And often what I have to say is that, is things that people don't want to hear. And if I was a grifter, I would tell you what I want you to hear, and I am not a grifter. I am going to tell you something that you don't want to hear. There were plenty of people who did not want to hear what I just said about Andrew Cuomo and David Gilbert. Now I'm about to tell you something else that a lot of you really don't want to hear. First, I have to write this super chat down. All right, Tucker Carlson. My goodness. A lot of gotcha questions tonight. That's okay. I can handle them, and I appreciate them because this teaches me how to handle gotcha questions. But there you go. All right. The next thing I'm about to say is something that I can guarantee you a lot of you don't want to hear. But here goes. Ashley Gilbert. I'm sorry. Did I say Ashley Gilbert? That was a mistake. Take 2. Ashley Babbitt should not have died. And we, as socialists, if we want to maintain any credibility, we have to be clear about that. I'm sorry. I know you don't want to hear that. She's right-wing. She's a Trump supporter. She would have killed you, Caleb. I'm aware. I have never found a single thing that Ashley Babbitt said that I agreed with. Nothing. If she'd ever met me, she probably just would have hurled a bunch of cuss words at me and said, "You dirty, rotten commie, I bet you work for Joe Biden." I don't care. Ashley Babbitt did not deserve to die. And if we're going to maintain any credibility as socialists, we have to be real about that. Ashley Babbitt did not deserve to die. Right? She might have deserved to get arrested for criminal trespassing. She might have deserved to get arrested for vandalism. But death penalty, no. Ashley Babbitt did not deserve to die. In the United States, we do not have the death penalty for trespassing. Furthermore, in the United States, we do not have the death penalty for vandalism. And even if we did have the death penalty for those crimes, she would still deserve a trial. Right? She would still deserve a trial for that. They would have to put her on trial for such things. Ashley Babbitt did not deserve to die. The police could have responded to her actions without shooting her. If you've seen the video, they didn't have to shoot her like that. She did not deserve to die. And as wrong as she was politically, as wrong as what she was doing was politically, she did not deserve to die. And this is the trap they have set for us. I'm sorry, but if you can't see this, you get caught up in the red team versus blue team stuff. This is the trap they have set for us. Writing it down. Right? When a black person is killed by the police in the United States, which happens very often, police brutality, it may not be happening as much because there's finally been awareness around it. What does the media do? What do the right wing, especially the Republicans, what do they do when a black person is murdered by the police? What do they do? Well, they generally say, oh, the police officer thought he had a gun, felt his life was in danger, so it's okay. Oh, he got arrested 5 years ago for marijuana, so he was a thug and a criminal and he deserved it. Oh, how do you know he wasn't, maybe, he must have been doing something. Oh, he was looking aggressive. You've seen this, and it drives me up the wall. They play this game where somehow it was okay, right? Ramarley Graham was handcuffed. I'm sorry, not Ramarley Graham. Oscar Grant was handcuffed in Oakland. His hands were behind his back. The police officer pulled his gun out, put it to the back of his head, and pulled the trigger. Right? And there were all these right-wing people who said, oh, come on, police brutality isn't real. That's just something you made up. That's a conspiracy theory. Well, no, it's not. And there are these people who, I swear, every time there is a police murder, Sean Bell, Ramarley Graham, right? Ramarley Graham, they stopped him and frisked him. He didn't want to be stopped and frisked because he had a joint in his pocket, so he ran home. They followed him all the way home. They burst into his apartment, didn't say it, just boom, and shot him in the apartment in Bronx, New York. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And not only did they kill this young man, Ramarley Graham, in New York, but not only that, when there was some investigation into the officers, all the cops piled in there to applaud and cheer for Ramarley Graham's killers. Like they were good guys. And they always do that. That's one of the most disgusting things about this whole police brutality thing. People don't talk about this. But the cops who murder, they get treated like heroes by the other cops. They all pile into their parole hearings, and when they drop the charges against them, they all applaud and cheer. And, the cops don't get up and say, oh, we disassociate from that. No. They stick by their brothers in blue. It's reprehensible. The response of the police unions and the patrolmen's associations to police brutality is reprehensible. It's just absolutely disgusting, right? I mean, it's like, there's many examples of this. And I used to go to court with police brutality victims in Cleveland. I saw this kind of thing up close and how it affects families. It's so wrong, absolutely wrong. And, anyhow, what was I saying again? Oh, anyway, Ashley Babbitt. So, the police state is a threat to all Americans. It is a threat to all Americans. It's been happening to black people for generations. Well, now, here's an instance where there was an altercation, there was a protest that got very out of control. This woman was engaged in some very illegal, provocative behavior, and the cops shot her. Well, I'm sorry, that's not how it works. Not how it works. She was unarmed. It's not okay. And if we want to maintain any consistency as opponents of the police state, we have to be real. We don't want police to be able to do what they did to Ashley Babbitt, or what they did to Ramarley Graham, or what they did to Sean Bell, or what they did to George Floyd. We don't want police to be able to do that, period. Police do not have a license to kill. Just because you are a police officer, just because you have a badge and a gun, does not give you the right to execute somebody, to summarily execute. You don't have that right. You do not have the right to kill people on sight. You don't have the right to do that if you're a police officer. If they're right-wing protesters, if they're random African Americans on the street, if they're left-wing activists protesting, you do not have the right to summarily execute people. You don't. Police do not have the right to summarily execute people. They don't. And we need to be real about that. We can't, if we want to maintain credibility, I'm sorry, right? Ashley Babbitt did not deserve to die. And if we want to be honest as a movement, we can denounce what she did. We can denounce, what she said. She seems like somebody who would not have liked me. I've met people that she reminds me of. The more I look into her life, the more I think, oh God, I really am glad I never met her. Doesn't seem like a very nice person. Doesn't seem like a very good person, honestly. But she didn't deserve to die. And if we quibble about that and we say, well, she was right-wing, no. Well, she was breaking the law. No. 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 I'm sorry. I'm sorry. In order to maintain credibility, you can't do that. Right? Get out of your head the idea that as a socialist or as a Marxist, you have some kind of loyalty to the Democratic Party. You don't. You have a loyalty to the working class. You might even have a loyalty to the labor movement. As corrupt as the unions are, you still have a loyalty to the unions, right? Unions protect workers' wages. If there's a strike, even if the union's corrupt, even if the union's racist in some cases, you'd support the union against the bosses. But Democratic Party, no. We have no loyalty to the Democratic Party. There are some good people in the Democratic Party. And there's some that aren't. But if you're a sincere, legit Marxist, you have no loyalty to the Democratic Party. You just don't. The Democratic Party is not... No. You have no loyalty to the Democratic Party. None. Right? And if you're intellectually honest, you will understand that just because Ashley Babbitt was doing bad stuff, just because she made AOC feel scared, just because she broke some windows, just because she was trespassing where she shouldn't have been, not okay. Not okay. They should not have murdered her. Period. End of the story. End of story. They didn't have the right. The cop did not have the right to pull out his gun and blow her away. So, I know that's going to make a lot of people angry. That's not going to win me the, Socialist Leftist of the Year award. It's not going to make me popular. I'm not on here to be popular. I'm not on here to be popular. I'm on here to get you to understand what we're talking about. USA is right now senile leadership. Find it euphoric. Euphoric. Where USA is now? Question mark. That's a very strange question. So forgive me for saying what needs to be said, but no. Ashley Babbitt didn't deserve to die, and her death is a sign of the police state coming for all of us. And that brings me to point number 3, after which point my opening remarks will have concluded. And point number 3, I'm sure that they'll clip this, right? I've been canceled how many times now? And it's, whatever. Point number 3 is this, right? I was talking to a good friend of mine. And we were talking, I don't know if you folks are aware, last night I posted an interview I did with my friend Daniel. Daniel's in a political group that I don't agree with on everything. I disagree with them on a lot, like global warming, their analysis of the world between the British system and the American system, and I'm not a LaRouche guy, right? I've read LaRouche's writings, but I'm not a LaRouche guy, right? I'm a Marxist. I mean, they think, Marx was a British agent, right? They have a very different worldview. They're into American system theory. I'm not a LaRoucheist. I'm not. But Daniel is my good friend, and Daniel is doing a lot to support China and to support the Belt and Road Initiative. He's doing a lot to promote, fusion energy and economic development. So I respect that, right? But I don't agree with the LaRouche group on a lot of things. And I was talking to a friend of mine. Shout out if you're watching. I won't say your name because everyone has the right to a private conversation. I mean, I'm sure you're not ashamed of anything you said, but you know, I was talking to a friend of mine today, and he said, he was, telling me about the stuff about the synthetic left. And I sent him an article that I recall reading, because this is an article that was published in 2010. And I remember this. This is a long time ago. 2010, Fidel Castro was still alive. And Fidel Castro was writing columns. He had retired, and he was writing columns for the newspaper of Cuba, the daily newspaper, Granma. He was writing columns for them. And he used his columns in the Cuban newspaper to quote from a writer named Daniel Estulin. And he quoted from Daniel Estulin, who is one of these LaRouche people. He quoted from Daniel Estulin about how drugs had been used to weaken the anti-war protest movement in the 1960s, and how Project MK Ultra was used to manipulate anti-war activists and protesters. And he quoted from Daniel Estulin about how the 1960s counterculture was very contrary to the values that communists put forward. That's what Fidel Castro wrote in his column in 2010. And I've sent that column to many people. And there you go. And when Fidel Castro wrote this column, basically saying that the CIA had promoted drug use as a way of subverting left-wing movements, that hippie counterculture and Woodstock and all of that was not progressive, and it was a way of manipulating left-wing people and hurting the organized political left and the anti-war movement. When he wrote that, the PSL, the Party of Socialism and Liberation, a Marxist group in the United States, denounced Fidel Castro for doing that. They went as far as to publish an article in their publication. They actually went as far as publishing an article, the PSL did, denouncing Fidel Castro for saying this. And saying, there's no room for conspiracy theories in our movement, blah, 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 blah. They found a lot of other things that this Daniel Estulin character had said that were obviously anti-communist, etc. But, you looked at this article, and I remember reading what Fidel wrote, which I've quoted what Fidel Castro said many times about how, and it's true, that drugs were used to manipulate the left-wing movement, that the CIA had a program called the Congress for Cultural Freedom that was used to fund Trotskyites and anti-communist leftists and reinvent what it meant to be a leftist, to promote counterculture. All that's true. So why the hell did the Party of Socialism and Liberation, the PSL, feel a need to publish this screed denouncing Fidel Castro, for saying this? I was talking to my friend about this today, trying to process this. Like, what was going through their minds? And Fidel Castro has said a lot of things over the years, right? Fidel Castro was a 9/11 truther. Fidel Castro, he used to be very homophobic, and then he changed his mind, and he says that was the biggest mistake he made. He's apologized for his homophobia. He's given deep, very sincere apologies for the policies of the Cuban government towards LGBT people during the 1960s. Fidel Castro, converted to Christianity in the final years of his life, right? In the 1990s, he converted to Christianity. So Fidel Castro's all over the place, right? And just because a leader of a socialist country says something doesn't mean you have to believe it, right? Leaders of socialist countries can be wrong, for goodness sakes, right? But anyhow, of all the things Fidel has ever said, why did the PSL feel a need to denounce Fidel Castro for this article. Ah, I'm glad they did in a way. It was good for me because it got me thinking. Because I remember reading this article and being like, what? And just reading this rant, how dare. That was the beginning of me starting to go, huh. Because I read this PSL article denouncing Fidel Castro. And then I went and read some of the source material. And I thought, okay, well, obviously some of what Daniel Estulin, very funny, Chase, some of what Daniel Estulin is saying is not right, but Fidel seems to be right that there was a use of drug use to manipulate our movements. Fidel seems to be right that there was a CIA program to fund, cultural leftism, the Congress for Cultural Freedom. So why did they feel a need to write this screed, this manifesto denouncing Fidel Castro? Why? Because what Fidel Castro was doing with that article, by opening up his columns to write, to basically republish what Daniel Estulin said about the Bilderberg Group. Yeah, Marcyites, right? I'm writing it down. The reason that piece by Fidel Castro was highly threatening to them. Because PSL's entire orientation is take over the movement. Be king of the protest cage. Get the permit. Get the signs. That's their whole orientation. That is their entire orientation as a political group, right? The Communist Party campaigns for Democrats. The RCP sells Bob Avakian's books and goes to police brutality protests. The PSL and the Answer Coalition, they stage rallies around whatever the latest trendy liberal cause is. Alexander the Great. Whatever the latest trendy liberal cause is, that's what they do. They've spent their whole life trying to be the leaders of a small section of U.S. society that calls itself the left. And that article by Fidel Castro basically said this section of U.S. society that you've dedicated your entire lives and careers to trying to be the king of, to trying to dominate, yeah, that section of U.S. society is completely controlled by the CIA. The CIA has been manipulating that group with drugs, by funneling money into it, foundation money, and basically you're trying to control the movement, and the movement is probably more controlled than average Americans are. And that's true. Average Americans right now, they don't know all about the history of Afghanistan. They just know they're sick of our soldiers being there. Average Americans, they don't know much about Gaddafi. They don't know much about Libyan history. But they think, who cares? Leave Libya alone. Why don't we focus on our own problems? But it's those educated folks, a lot of whom think they're socialists now, who go to college and learn about, Fidel Castro violated human rights, and Gaddafi was homophobic, and therefore it was okay for the United States. The movement, what you can call the movement, is more right-wing, more pro-imperialist than average Americans are at this point. And the government, the CIA, Congress for Cultural Freedom, MK Ultra, they have had their fingers in the movement for a long time. And Fidel Castro highlighted that. And the leadership of PSL said, no, that can't be true, no, because their whole shtick, their whole gig is trying to lead the movement. And so that's why they flipped out and wrote that big screed denouncing Fidel Castro for saying that. Because what if one of their members read that article by Fidel? Oh my, they want to be in denial about it. Look, folks, out of the movement and to the masses. Out of the movement and to the masses. We need to get to average Americans. We need to get to average Americans. The movement is not going anyplace. The small percentage of Americans that are in communist groups, that consider themselves to be Marxists, that are going to liberal protests, they are not going to make a revolution. They are not going to bring the USA to socialism. Socialism in the United States will be achieved by the broad masses of Americans. Black, white, Latino, Asian, Arab, different nationalities, different religions, different ethnicities. It will be the broad masses of Americans who are hungry, who are losing their jobs, losing their homes, are sick of these wars. They'll be the ones that bring socialism to the United States of America. And the movement hates average Americans. Very funny. The movement hates average Americans. The movement thinks that average Americans are Euro settlers. The movement thinks that average Americans deserve to be poorer. The movement thinks that average Americans are racist, sexist, homophobic, and transphobic. The movement thinks that average Americans need to get, the shit kicked out of them until they learn to be more woke and acceptable. The movement thinks that average Americans need to go to NYU and study gender studies. How dare they bring their disgusting ideas. The movement thinks average Americans are stupid because they're religious. The movement thinks that average Americans, need to be poorer to atone for the crimes of American imperialism, etc. The movement at this point hates average Americans and sees them as a group of people that are despicable. They see them as a basket of deplorables. That's what they think. That's what they think, right? I don't want to get into specifics, okay? Why hasn't there been a Protestant socialist leaders and why has there been... Oh, okay. That's an interesting question. I'll write it down. Not much. I have heard a lot of stupid things over the course of the last 4 weeks because, unfortunately, I got into a situation where I had to... I'm not going to get into specifics of it because it's not worth discussing on this stream, but I have heard movement people say things. I've had to deal with movement people. Why? I swore I would never deal with movement people, but somehow got into a situation where somebody talked to somebody and somebody was someplace they shouldn't have been, and I had to talk to movement people. And I heard some of the dumbest statements I've ever heard in my life. Only in the movement, would people say, quote, cowboy hats are right-wing. I'm sorry, you want to lead a revolution and become the leaders of the American government, but you are going to cancel anyone who wears a cowboy hat. Seriously. I heard this secondhand from a movement person. Quote, cowboy hats are right-wing. I guess you can hang your hat on it, folks. You can hang your hat on it. Cowboy hats are right-wing. Cowboy hats are right-wing. Manuel Zelaya in Honduras, socialist president, he wore a cowboy hat. Evo Morales, socialist president, he wore a cowboy hat. Pedro Castillo, new president of Brazil, he wore a cowboy hat. There are millions of Americans who wear cowboy hats. There's a whole culture of African-American cowboys who wear cowboy hats. I don't generally wear cowboy hats. I tend to wear fedoras. I don't like cowboy hats. That's not my style. There's nothing inherently right-wing about cowboy hats. Millions of Americans wear cowboy hats, and millions of Americans who are not deplorables and not evil satanic right-wingers wear cowboy hats. But the wisdom of one of these movement people was displayed to me. Cowboy hats are right-wing. That was a statement that was declared. Cowboy hats are right-wing. Okay. Great. Okie dokie. Cowboy hats are right-wing. This is... I could make a list. I should have made a list before I came on here. But, it's just... I did my whole... You've seen my video about movement managers. right? I talk about, okay, if you hear me clap once, if you hear me clap twice, if you hear me clap 3 times, all right, now we're all going to sit in a circle and we're going to talk about our favorite pizza. And Lenin, yeah, we don't talk about Lenin here. That's like some white dude who wrote books like 100 years ago. Instead, we're going to talk about our feelings today and why it's sexist not to vote for Nancy Pelosi. Okay? That's what we're going to talk about today, sir. Sir, I know you're really passionate about your belief in this economic stuff, but for us, socialism is about sensitivity training, and socialism is about going to a very expensive Ivy League school and learning exactly what words you're allowed to use and what words you are not allowed to use. That's what socialism means to us, sir. And I have noticed that since you walked into this room, you used about 15 of those words that socialists are supposed to not use. So I'm going to have to put you in the timeout corner while we all talk about how you're a neo-fascist because you did not use the words that we all use. So stop talking about Lenin, okay? Can you stop talking about Lenin? Stop talking about Marx. Stop criticizing capitalism. Stop criticizing Democrats. Can you do that? Can you do that for me, please? And instead, we're all going to sit in a circle and we're going to tell jokes about, we're going to talk about our feelings for an hour. And then we're all going to go register people to vote for Nancy Pelosi. That's what we're going to do now, okay? Now, sir, can you stop talking about, like, imperialism? Because nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear that. Gaddafi deserved to die because he disagreed with Hillary Clinton, who's, like, totally cool and awesome because she's, like, a woman and she's, like, commander-in-chief, okay? And she should have won, and Trump stole the election because of Russia. And so anyone ever associated with Russia needs to, like, go to jail for a long time. So that's what we're doing here. So if you don't like that, you need to, like, go somewhere else. Well, folks, I agree with the last thing that the person I was just impersonating said. If you don't like that, you need to go somewhere else. I am somewhere else. Here is somewhere else. You're right. If you don't like that, you need to go somewhere else. And that somewhere else is right where you are right now. We are somewhere else. I am sick of this, I don't know what you want to call it, movement managing, ID poll. I'm sick of whatever this stuff is. Whatever that was, that big long thing I just did with my voice, whatever that was, I haven't given it an adequate name. Every time I come up with a name, the name is not adequate in some conceivable way. Whatever that was, I'm something else. If you don't like that, I'm here for you. I love you all. Names and locations. I'll call you out as I see you. Names and locations. And then we'll start hammering out these super chats. Names and locations. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who's with us tonight? Nadia out in East Harlem. Cleveland Pirate Alex. Nate in Chicago. Calgary, Canada. John Whitty in Houston. Fairhope, Alabama. Chaya in Montreal. Good friend of the program. Elias from Finland. Nassau County, Char Darling, welcome, welcome, welcome. Wilmington, Delaware, Loveland, Ohio, Springfield, Missouri. Dan in Australia. Jeff, Grand Canyon, Arizona. Georgia, Chan, Southern California. Norco. Nate from Australia, Illinois. Kieran from San Diego. Richie from Staten Island. Emma from Ontario, Canada. Vancouver, Canada. Steve in Montreal. Los Angeles, Pomona, California, Chicago, Santa Clarita, California, Mimi and Leo from Puebla, Mexico, welcome, welcome. Solidarity from Hawaii, says Robert Webb, welcome, welcome. Fred from Alameda, JT24 in Mississippi, Mary in rural West Virginia, Zach in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Tony in Tasmania, Stephen from Seattle, Rhode Island, Providence, Rhode Island, San Miguel, Mexico, Foster in Kentucky, Undisclosed Town in California, Bendigo, Australia, David Fox, Little Falls, New Jersey, Tamara and Dario from Brooklyn. Shout out to you guys, great folks. Billy Kane in Gateshead, England, Adelaide, Australia, California, Ukiah, California, Texas with our Marxist-Leninist cowboy hats, says Jamie Gray. I love you, Jamie. That's great. Alan in Chicago. Chicago, Treasure Coast, Florida, Nema in London. It's a Valley Girl voice, says Kinky. Wow, never thought of that. Never been to the Valley. Sam in Houston, James Kane in Massachusetts, Southwest Michigan, LA. Keep it up, Caleb. Enoch, Australia, Denver, Colorado. Joshua Tree, Traverse, Michigan, Beehive State, Southern California. Dante from SoCal, so red, Northern California. Asheville, North Carolina. Kendall from San Diego. Marlon in San Diego. Carmen in Reading, Pennsylvania. Cowboy hats are based. Anthony from Detroit. Wow. Wow, folks. So glad to be with you all. San Antonio, Texas. Laura Floyd. Wow. 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 I did not get your super chat asking about the oil news. Did someone repeat that so I can write it down? Wow. All right, folks. I've got a lot of super chats to answer. Tacoma, Washington, St. Louis. All righty. Latest oil news. All right. I'll write that down. Captain Waffles. Latest oil news. All righty. Is there a such thing as a totally worthless human being? No. No, I would not. I would argue that no. No, that no human being is totally worthless. I believe every human being has potential to make a contribution to society. Every human being has potential. And we should never declare people to be worthless, declare people to be useless, declare people to be hopeless. That's one of the most disturbing things about Jordan Peterson's lectures that I've ever heard, is that how it just seems like there was just a constant, declaring of people to be less than valuable. I believe every human being has some inherent value. And I think that is, I think that is the premise on which one should operate. So there you go. All right. Suffering Olympics. Yeah, unfortunately, in left-wing circles, a tendency has developed. Through which people try to prove that they are better than other people, or they're more important than other people, or they have the right to win an argument with other people because they have suffered more in their life. Well, there's two sides to this. On the one hand, right, there's a lot of people who have suffered, and we don't acknowledge that. And in some cases, not all, but in some cases, their suffering does make them more entitled to speak about certain topics than people who haven't been through their suffering. Look, a black person is more qualified to talk about racism than I am. I'm a white person. I have not experienced racism. So if a black person talks about racism and I interrupt them and go, actually, no, it's this way, I shouldn't be doing that because, they have experienced racism. I have not. I may have observed it, but I have not experienced it. And so there are instances where citing one's suffering as a source of credibility is legit, right? And that said, though, just because you've been oppressed, and let me put it this way. I almost said it the wrong way there. The way I started to say it, just because you've been oppressed, that's not even the way I should say it. I shouldn't say it that way. Let me say it this way. It is dangerous. It is very dangerous. It is very, very dangerous to view victimhood as something to aspire to. Overcoming victimhood, that's something to aspire to. Going a long way, overcoming hardship, enduring hardship, becoming stronger through it, that is something to aspire to. But it is extremely dangerous to get into a spot where you want to think of yourself as a victim, number one, and you compare your own victimhood to someone else's victimhood. That leads to a mindset that is very destructive, a very destructive mindset. When you think of yourself as a victim and you compare yourself to other people, Char Char Darling says Kamala Harris is living this out, and that's correct. And that was largely a point of my book on Kamala Harris. If you think, there's nothing that gives people the capacity to harm other people more than thinking that they are the greatest victim. Right? I mean, if you declare that you're the greatest victim, suddenly you are capable of harming people in ways you were not capable of doing before. Because suddenly you've said, look, I'm the victim here. And it leads to a mindset that enables you to do very extreme harm. Murderers, people who commit vengeful murders, they believe they're the victims. Usually, if someone goes out and murders somebody, if they're not like a serial killer, but they're just somebody who feels they've been wronged, they feel like they're the victim. In their mind, I'm the victim, right? Great example. Guy's wife cheats on him. He's mad about it. He goes, murders his wife. He just took someone's life, right? Maybe it was shitty of her to cheat on him. Maybe they had a monogamous relationship. She went behind his back. She cheated on him. But in his mind, he says, I'm the victim. My wife just cheated on me. So therefore, that enabled him, that feeling of being the victim, being overwhelmed by his own feelings of victimhood. He now was able to do something far worse than spousal infidelity. He was able to take the life of his spouse. Now, how could he do this, right? I can understand he's angry and all of that, but because he got into the mindset that his victimhood, he was just fixating on his own victimhood, that enabled him to do something very cruel, very ruthless, and kill somebody. And often, people who do very, very, very bad things do it out of a feeling of being overwhelmed by their own victimhood. They learn to kind of wallow in their victimhood, and suddenly that enables them to harm people. There is a person in my life, and there is a person in my life years ago, it's been a few years now, who harmed me very badly. The person harmed me. And I remember being just shocked at how much they had harmed me. I had never been victimized like this person victimized me. They made a decision. They did something to me that really harmed me. Really caused me a huge amount of pain. And I have processed in my mind many times, how was it that this person was able to do this? How did they let themselves do it? How was it that this person was able to do this? Because I knew this person very intimately. This person was one of my best friends, and they betrayed me. And they betrayed me in a way that was very catastrophic. And I don't want to get into details because that's not important. That's not important. This isn't about me. I'm talking about the principle here. Many times I processed, how is it that this person was able to harm me like this? How was it that they were able to do this? And I realized that the entire time I had known this person, number one, they had constantly encouraged me to think of myself as a victim. When they liked me, when I was their friend for, 5-6 years, they constantly tried to get me to think of myself as a victim. And that was because they thought of themselves as a victim, number one. And the other thing was, every time I told this friend of mine that I felt guilty, they would suddenly turn into my lawyer and start arguing with me that whatever I had done was understandable. And I would say to them, no. I'd say, yeah, I shouldn't have done this. And they'd be like, yeah, but you did this, you did that, and so it makes... And I'm like, no, okay, you understand why I did it, I still shouldn't have done it. Yeah, but... And they just would never let me feel any guilt. It was like they just, when they liked me, They wanted me to think of myself as a victim. And furthermore, they never wanted me to feel any guilt. And I look back on that person and in our relationship, which was a very close relationship. This person was a very, it wasn't a romantic partner or anything like that. It was just somebody I was very good friends with. And I think about how our friendship ended and how they really stabbed me in the back. I mean, wow, didn't see this coming. Actually, I did see it coming. That's a whole other story. But I think about it. I've processed many times, how was this possible? And I realized that the only way this person could hurt me so much was because they thought of themselves as a victim, number one, and they did not feel any guilt. Right? They had learned not to allow themselves to feel any guilt, and they had learned to see themselves as a victim. And that when they liked me, when I was a part of their universe, when I was intimately close with this person, when I was their friend, that's why they were constantly thinking of me as a victim, because they're a victim and I'm their friend, so I must be a victim. And on top of that, when I would express regret about things I had done, right, over the years, I shouldn't have done this, right? They would immediately fly into this defensive mode. And it was because I was their friend. I was part of their universe. So I couldn't feel any guilt, and I should think of myself as a victim. That's a very seductive way of thinking, right? I mean, imagine how relieving it could be if you just thought of yourself as the biggest victim in the world, number one. And number two, imagine how relieving it would be to never feel any guilt. That's a very seductive feeling. Think about it. It's very seductive. It's very seductive. Very, very, very seductive, right? Imagine thinking that no one's a bigger victim than you are, number one. That gives you, wow, no one suffered as much as you are. You get to feel sorry for yourself, number one. And number two, never having to feel any guilt. Every bad thing you've done, oh yeah, but that makes sense, what you've been through. And that is a feeling. With that feeling, you can do anything. With that kind of feeling, you can do anything. If you're the biggest victim in the world and you have decided you never have to feel any guilt, you could do anything. You could drop atomic bombs on whole cities. You could do anything with that mindset. It is so dangerous. That mindset is so dangerous. And this person would not have harmed me the way they did, I am convinced, if they had not somehow convinced themselves in the world that they were the greatest victim, number one, and had not set up a situation where they would not feel regret. And that is dangerous. And that's why this suffering Olympics stuff is dangerous. And I probably sound a lot like ContraPoints right now, right, in that Envy video. And she was kind of getting at what I'm getting at. She did it in a really sloppy way and smeared the whole history of communism and all of that. But the overall point that she was making was kind of along these lines. If you get into a mindset where it's not about actually achieving anything, it's about taking revenge on those who have and how unfair it is, that's a dangerous mindset. That is a dangerous, dangerous mindset to get into. So, that said, that's why this suffering Olympics stuff is so dangerous. It's very dangerous for these reasons, right? If you get into that mindset, you can do really evil things. You can do very, very evil things if you get into that mindset. And I directly observed this. In this person. This person harmed me badly. Very badly harmed me. Very badly harmed me. But it was because they were playing the suffering Olympics. And in their mind, no one had ever suffered as much as they had. And they had no reason to feel any guilt. And I did not see it coming. I mean, I kind of saw it coming, which is a whole nother story, but anyway, enough about that. I'm never going to get done. I've got so many more super chats to get through. This is going to be a long night, so I got to start answering them. Hassan Parker's $3 million house. I could care less about that. I really could care less about that. Socialism does not oppose wealth. It opposes poverty. The goal of socialism is for there to be so much wealth that eventually class differences and inequality fades away. Read The Critique of the Goethe Program by Karl Marx. I don't know. Who is Hassan Piker again? I mean, I don't care. And I don't care. I don't care. Jimmy crack corn and I don't care. Jimmy crack corn and I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. I really could care less about... who is he again? Who is he? Who is Hassan Piker? Who cares? All right. forgive me. If you deeply care about that, I apologize. I apologize if I've offended you because you deeply care about this issue. Thomas Skidmore's Politics of Military Rule in Brazil. I think it's a prescient potential military interference in the U.S. I'll have to check that book out, Jay Grimes. Jay Grimes wants a shout out to Thomas Skidmore's The Politics of Military Rule in Brazil. I have never read that book or heard of it, but you paid a super chat, so we're shouting it out. There you go. The doctor's plot in Stalin. I'm not an expert on that. One thing I have, so the allegation that I've generally heard is that there was an alleged plot against Stalin by a group of doctors, and those doctors were arrested for their plot against Stalin. And when they were arrested, Soviet media accused these doctors of being cosmopolitan, and everyone said that that was code for Jew, right? And that it was an anti-Semitic crackdown, that they didn't really plot against Stalin. They weren't really plotting to kill Stalin. It was an anti-Semitic crackdown. And then many people have pointed out that a number of the doctors involved were not Jewish. No, a number of them were, apparently, but a number who weren't. But they alleged that was anti-Semitic innuendo in Soviet media. Look, there's a lot of anti-Semitism in Russia. The Soviet Union did a lot to fight anti-Semitism. They outlawed public statements of anti-Semitism. They had public media campaigns against anti-Semitism. But there's a lot of anti-Semitism in Eastern Europe. That's, so I don't, I don't really know. Honestly, I have no idea. I just don't know. It's a little bit weird that, I guess from my understanding, a number of the people, arrested in the doctor's plot were not Jewish. But is it possible that anti-Semitism or anti-Semitic innuendo could have been involved? I suppose. I'm not an expert on it. I haven't done a huge amount of research on that topic. Thin blue line people. All right. Blue line people. Reach them with socialism. All right. So there you go. All right. World Economic Forum and the Great Reset. Well, look, it's pretty clear that the ultra rich have made out, the monopolists, Walmart, Amazon, they've made out like bandits during the pandemic. And they are pushing the green stuff more than anybody else. And they've made out like bandits during the pandemic. COVID is not, it's not like a conspiracy. It's not a hoax. It's a real thing, but they've made out like bandits, and they're trying to reset the world, basically, so their monopolies are more secure. There's no question about that. They have an austerity agenda. They envision a post-industrial, world. So there you go. All right. Is it worth joining a party in the USA? I plead the fifth. I don't answer that question. Because, I was in a party for 8 years. I tried it. It didn't work out for me. I will not join a party. I can't join a party because of my job, first of all. It's one of the absolute rules at my job that you cannot join a party. So I cannot join a party, and I cannot start a new party. So don't think I'm starting one, because I'm definitely not starting one. But honestly, if I was not working where I work, if I had the option of joining a party, I doubt that I would. Because I've done that for a while, and I'm sick. How many parties do we have in the United States? So we got the Communist Party, we got the Socialist Party, we got the Socialist Workers Party, we got the Revolutionary Communist Party, we got the ISO and the QWH and the XYZ, and I don't care. None of these parties are really parties. In the United States, we have a two-party system. Did you know that? So if you're forming another party, you're already deportations under Stalin. If you're forming another party, you're already at that point kind of declaring to average Americans that you're irrelevant. Average Americans are like, wait, we have two parties in the country. We have two parties. We have two parties. So by forming another party, what are you doing? You're already kind of telling American workers, I'm irrelevant. Furthermore, when Lenin formed Party of a New Type, it wasn't Lenin and like 5 or 6 people who thought Lenin was totally awesome, dude. It was Lenin and Stalin and Bukharin and Zinoviev and Litvinov and Kamenev and all kinds of great revolutionary thinkers and organizers who were committed to Lenin's project, joined it, and they overruled Lenin many times. It was a serious group of all the serious revolutionaries in Russia. It was the real deal. It was something real. And nowadays, all the parties are little tiny personality cults. They're all run by one or two people that dominate them all. And but hey, if you're able to join one of these groups and get something done, I'm not going to stop you. I was in a group for a long time and I got a lot done. Despite the flaws of the group I'm in, as angry as I am, I accomplished a lot. There were some things I did when I was in that group I'm very proud of. There were other things I did in that group that I'm not so proud of. But, eh, but if you join one of these groups, that's on you, right? It's on you, okay? If you join one of these communist groups in the United States, that's on you. I didn't tell you not to, and I didn't tell you to do it. And no, I am not involved in a secret conspiracy to take over the Communist Party or any other party. And if you think that, you're smoking something, okay? And seriously, I mean, I have no interest in trying to take over one of these tiny little parties. I have no interest in, maneuvering with a great conspiracy. The Center for Political Innovation is not a pre-party formation. It is a think tank through which I can engage in socialist education. And that is all I am interested in doing at this time. So, believe me, don't believe me, join a party, don't join a party, that's on you. I don't care. I'm doing my own thing. I'm engaging in socialist education. I think a think tank would be taken far more seriously by the broad masses of Americans than a party would be. At this point, if you say I'm a think tank, people go, oh, like the Heritage Foundation, like the American Enterprise Institute. That makes sense to me. Oh, in a country with two parties, you've started a think tank with a unique perspective through which people who are in parties might be able to get political education. That makes sense. Think tank makes sense to people. Party makes sense to people who are living in communist, in communist land. But to broad masses of Americans, a think tank makes sense, a party does not. And also, let me add that democratic centralism, the democratic centralist organizing method, hasn't worked out too well in the United States. For the last several decades, hasn't worked out too well. Right? I am waiting to see one of these democratic centralist parties in the United States turn into something that has a mass base. It hasn't happened yet. There you go. I am not confident at this time that parties are the way to go, but there's a lot of great people in parties, and if you like what I have to say and you're in a party, good for you, right? And I'm glad to hear that. I was in a party for many times and many years, and parties do good things. They organize protests, they build relationships, they work in the labor movement, and you're probably doing good things in your party, in addition to whatever you're doing that I don't agree with. So, again, I stay out of that. I'm not doing the party thing right now. You can do whatever you want. All right. The influence of Japan, South Korea, Taiwan on China. Well, the thing is that Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, China has studied all of those countries extensively. The Asian tigers have been very influential on China. Singapore has also been very influential on China. And one thing that the Chinese Communist Party does is it's constantly adjusting its policies. But it tends to look to regions, or look to countries throughout the region and see what they've been successful at and try to learn from their policies. And then it also tends to implement, Taiwan is not a country, you're correct, it's part of China, but it tends to implement policies in a local area first, and then try them out on a national scale after they've studied that. The Chinese Communist Party has a very unique method of developing policy, implementing policy. And so, yes, they have studied the region and what other governments in the region have done. They've studied that. All right, Claudia Jones. Claudia Jones was a Caribbean American who lived in the United States, who was a leader of the Communist Party USA. She was, she was black, but she was Caribbean. I mean, she helped develop the Communist Party's, thesis on the Black Belt question. She was part of the anti-Browder campaign and the campaign against Earl Browder. She was a very prominent leader of the Communist Party, and she was eventually deported from the United States. She was forced to move to Britain. I think she spent most of the rest of her life in Britain. During the 1950s, she was basically forced out of the country because she was not born in the United States. And she was a very outspoken black, feminist, black Marxist-Leninist. and very radical, Trinidadian. Yeah, I mean, in any of her writing you can find, she was an ML. She was a tanky through and through. I read her article that she wrote about Earl Browder and how Earl Browder abandoned black nationalism and denounced the concept of black nationalism. And she worked with William Z. Foster. She was an ally of William Z. Foster. She was great. Claudia Jones was a great person, one of the people I look up to. All right. Communist analysis of Judaism, Islam, Christendom, and Hinduism. Look, I'm sorry, I don't have time to give a thorough analysis of four major religions right now. Christianity is my religion, which I am the most familiar with, and so I've gone into that in depth. I've spent some time in the Muslim world. I have many friends who are Jewish and practice Judaism as their religion, but I am not qualified to give a thorough analysis of any of those. In Hinduism, I'm just not qualified to give a thorough analysis of those religions at this time. I apologize. I know you wanted a more answer, but while I'm able to give a thorough analysis of Christianity, I am not able to give a thorough analysis of these faiths, on the same level, because they are not my faith, and I wouldn't feel qualified doing that. So there you go. All right, is materialism suppressed by the establishment? I don't think so. I mean, materialism is an aspect of Marxism. It's an aspect of Marxism, but Marxism is dialectical materialism, right? It's all that exists in the universe is matter. That matter is constantly in motion. Materialism and idealism are two schools of thinking. Idealism says that the mind is the reality is a reflection of the mind, right? Whether it's the mind of God, God said, let there be light, and he created it, or whether, it's like The Secret, where it's like people think money, 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 and does the mind create reality, that's idealism, or is the mind a reflection of reality, right? Is thought inseparable from matter that thinks? And materialism, Marxism is on the materialist side of the argument. It argues that matter is primary and that thoughts and emotions and consciousness are a reflection of matter. That's the idea. And I don't think that's suppressed. I think nowadays there's a lot of atheists, who are hard materialists, who say there is only matter. Matter and energy are the only things that exist. There's no spiritual forces. Ideas are a reflection of matter and energy. That's Richard Dawkins. There's a lot of folks who are materialists. They are just not historical materialists. They are not dialectical materialists, but they're materialists. So I don't think that concept is suppressed. All right. Favorite Parenti book. My favorite Michael Parenti book. Which one would it be? Super Patriotism is pretty good. What else? Super Patriotism. The Assassination of Julius Caesar, what is it? The Reality of Imperialism, that's pretty good. What else? Black Shirts and Reds, that's pretty good. Great review of that, by the way. Class War did a great review of that. Great stuff. All right. One of the biggest problems of postmodernism, human beings need ideology. Human beings need ideology. They need something to believe in. The face of imperialism, right? Human beings need ideology. They need something to believe in. And if you're saying there is no truth, there is no grand narrative, there's no point in life, those are things that if you lead people to those conclusions, they can become suicidal. Postmodernism is very dangerous. It's deconstructing the beliefs that are central to holding societies together, right? Postmodernism is extremely dangerous, I would argue. And people need ideology. They need class analysis. Class Analysis did a really great review of Black Shirts and Reds by Michael Parenti. It's a great video he put together. Check out Class Analysis review. But yeah, postmodernism is extremely dangerous. People who joined the military after 9/11. What is an ideology like Marxism, but idealist? Like Marxism, but idealist. Alrighty. People who joined the military after 9/11. I've known a few over the years. There was a kid at my school who I wasn't particularly fond of who signed up for the military, after 9/11. went in as soon as he graduated. But then there was a guy I used to work with who did the same thing, had been in the military, and he was a pretty cool dude. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, look, 9/11, a lot of people got hurt. And if you're not a leftist, if you're not a Marxist, you're not an anti imperialist, your understanding is a lot of people got hurt. And I want to join the military and fight against the people who hurt those people and make sure something like this doesn't happen again. And that's admirable, isn't it not? I mean, you saw a bunch of people on TV get hurt, and it really happened. I mean, it's not fake news. They did get hurt. And your understanding is that you're going to go fight against the people that did this and make sure it doesn't happen again, and you're going to help with that effort. I mean, that's pretty admirable, right? Just so happens that joining the U.S. military, instead of fighting the people who did this, you're fighting against the people who fight them, like Gaddafi, like Saddam Hussein, etc. But I mean, I don't think they're bad people. I think they just, they saw people suffering on 9/11, and they wanted to do something about it. Use value and its truth value. Use value. Truth value. All right. So that, I don't think we should demonize those people who signed up. They again, this is a good thing about human beings. They genuinely want to help other people. Unfortunately, imperialism has become very good at manipulating those feelings. That's what their humanitarian campaigns, Save Darfur, all that stuff. That's what this is all about. Yeah, there you go. All right. Books on Afghanistan. The book I always recommend on Afghanistan is called Afghanistan, Washington's Secret War by Philip Benoski. That is the book I recommend the most on Afghanistan. Afghanistan, Washington's Secret War by Philip Benoski. That is the book I recommend. Next book. Next point. Socialism Protecting Inefficient Firms. Well, I mean, when you have a state-run economy, when the means of production are operated not for profits, but for the benefit of society, sometimes you might choose to keep private institutions afloat that the market would have otherwise eliminated. Yeah, so there you go. Yeah, I mean, that's all there is to it. When the market is not in command, yes, sometimes inefficient businesses might get propped up. Baader Meinhof, they were an ultra-left adventurous terrorist group in Germany during the 1970s. The Baader Meinhof gang, kind of like the Weathermen, terrorism, ultra-left adventurism. If I'm not mistaken, I think one of them who's still in prison has become like an anti-Semite or something like that, right? I think one of them who's in prison is no longer a Marxist. He's like a neo-Nazi or something, but I could be wrong. All right. Does China need to rein in its market sector? That's up to China to decide. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm not in charge of China. I think the Chinese Communist Party, that's constantly collecting information, knows a lot better than I do what they need to do. So, we'll see. I mean, they're constantly collecting information. They're constantly adjusting their socialist system. I think they know what's best for their economy. I don't. All right. Is the Russian boomer generation the last hope for socialism in Russia? No. No. No, I don't know where you get that from, but, no. I mean, no. I mean, that's just a weird question. That is a bizarre question. I don't know. I mean, the Soviet Union's not coming back, folks. Right? I think Russia currently has an anti-imperialist government. There's a large amount of state control. They have paid maternity leave. They have national health care. The government is, trying to redirect and has created a huge farming boom. And, but the Soviet Union, as far as the Soviet model of socialism returning to Russia, that's not going to happen. Not going to happen. Right? Russia moving in a more socialistic left-wing economic direction, that's possible. But as far as like the Soviet Union returning, that won't happen. That won't happen. Russian politics is far more complicated than American, audiences generally understand. The Communist Party is a big deal there. There's a lot of, economic thinking that is what we would consider left wing, but in Russia they don't consider it to be left wing. It's nationalism, or it's just, it's far more complicated, right? In the West, we live in kind of a bubble where our politics is very, very, we're dominated by liberalism. And outside of the Western world, liberalism is not the prevailing ideology. And there are various shades and strands of illiberalism in politics around the world. And because of that, Russia's politics are far more complicated than American politics. Same for Iran. The same for a lot of countries around the world that are not part of the West. they're not like NATO members. Their politics is not anywhere near as simple as ours because liberalism is not the dominant perspective. So there you go. Next question. Marxist, feminist, trans exclusive. All right, I'm aware of that, and my position is this. I know many trans people, and I'm very good friends with many trans people, and I love them. I love them. I deeply care about them. I want them to be allowed to be who they are. I want them to not face bullying, not face discrimination, be able to live their lives without harassment, without degradation, and that's it. I don't have an in-depth understanding of what trans is. I just don't. I don't have an in-depth analysis of how this fits in with other issues. I just don't. But I do say that, there are many trans people I know, and I care about them. I want them to be respected. I want them to be who they are. That's it. That's it. And, if you're looking for me to say more than that, I'm not going to satisfy you. And I can't satisfy everybody, right? I just can't. And there are many issues related to the trans issue that I just don't know enough about. And if I open my mouth on it, I end up saying something that I regret because I just don't know enough about it. And, I deeply care about all my trans friends, and I respect them, and I would never want to see anyone harm them or tell them they couldn't be who they are. And that's that. So there you go. All right. How will socialism tame the hood? Well, I think giving people economic opportunity makes life more stable. Right? If people have jobs and opportunities and education, they're much less likely to engage in crime, right? And, and their life is going to be more stable as well, right? If you have a stable income, your housing situation is going to be more stable. Your living situation is going to be much more stable. Your life's going to be more predictable. Economic justice brings a better life to people throughout the world, and this applies not just on a neighborhood level, but on a global level. Economic development is how you end wars. That's what Afghanistan needs more than anything, is economic development. And the same for Latin America, the same for Central America, where these refugees are coming from. Economic development is the road to peace and stability. So socialism, which would bring economic development, would bring peace and stability. I have never heard that name. Lagododalus? I've never heard that dunk. All right. Anti-CIA movies. Well, there's a really good news piece that was made once that I saw. It was by Bill Moyers, and it's called The Secret Government. It's just kind of a quick overview of the CIA's regime change operations around the world. It's called The Secret Government. And if you can find it on YouTube, it's really a really good piece that just kind of goes over the coups the CIA has waged, etc. Check out The Secret Government. That I recommend. Is infinite growth possible? Well, here's the thing, right? And see, when you say infinite growth, what do you mean? There is obviously, only so much matter in the universe. So, the amount of matter in the universe is not expanding. So I'm not claiming that the amount of matter in the universe is going to expand. However, I will claim that human beings are capable of constantly reinventing their relationship with natural resources. Human beings are constantly changing the way they interact with nature. What would a caveman do with oil? He'd say, what is this gooey stuff? Get this away from me. Right? If you gave a caveman a bunch of oil, he'd say, ew, get this gooey oil. What is this? Right? You gave a caveman a lump of coal. What would he do with it? He would just look at it. He'd say, that's weird. Okay, this is a rock. And give a caveman a diamond. He would say, oh, it's really nice. That's it, right? That the way human beings interact with their environment is constantly changing. It's constantly changing. The way we interact with our environment is constantly changing. And do I believe that human beings are capable of continuously reinventing their relationship with nature, reinventing their relationship with energy and their energy sources? Yes. So in that sense, I would argue that I don't think there's a limit to human creativity. I don't think there's a limit to the ability of human beings to advance to higher modes of production, higher energy sources. I think human creativity cannot be capped. I don't think we reach a point where, oh, humans can't invent anything. Humans are stuck doing this. No. Ants have been building their ant farms the same way for thousands of years. Beavers have been building their beaver dams the same way for thousands of years, but human beings are capable of constantly reinventing their relationship with their environment and forcing their environment to serve them in a new way. So in that sense, I guess I do believe in infinite growth. And if that's, I know that's a big sin in left-wing circles. Now we're supposed to be pessimistic. We're supposed to want degrowth. Well, nope. National general strike. I mean, is it for real? I mean, a lot of communist groups over the years have called a national general strike. RCP used to call a general strike on May 1st. They had May Day 1980. That was a big thing they did. The Progressive Labor Party used to always call a general strike, and it wasn't one. If you're going to call a general strike, I'm for it. I mean, if you really are going to call a general strike to meet the needs of working people, I'm for it, but really do it. And there's a lot of people calling a general strike, and it doesn't happen. Right? Now, I think the day without an immigrant, May 1st, 2006, that was a serious, I mean, that had an economic impact, right? That was immigrants around the United States. They went on strike. And that had an impact, right? So that was like a real national general strike. I mean, it was only for immigrant workers, but it had an impact. It certainly had an impact. So, I mean, there you go. All right, Turkmenistan. I know absolutely nothing about the politics of Turkmenistan. Can't tell you if they're Bonapartist. Reaganomics run amok. Absolutely. Neoliberal economics, the economics of Milton Friedman, Alan Greenspan, Ayn Rand, Friedrich von Hayek is absolutely run amok. Is Tucker Carlson an ally of socialists? See, that's a gotcha, and I'm supposed to say he is, and they're like, aha! Well, no. Tucker Carlson's not a socialist. He's right-wing. His perspective is not my perspective. But, I mean, it's nice that he will give a platform to people like Max Blumenthal and others. And if he invited me on, I would probably go on if I had the opportunity. And, I've been on CNN. Does that make, I mean, I would go anywhere that I'm invited. I will go anywhere that I'm invited, and I think it would be beneficial to spread my ideas to go. Now, there are some cases where, occasionally I will get an invitation that I will decline. Look, I was offered the opportunity to debate Richard Spencer, and I decided not to do it. I did debate Augustus Invictus. I did debate what's his name? Stefan Molyneux. But Richard Spencer, I chose not to debate Richard Spencer because I know how his debates generally go. He doesn't want to argue with me about communism. He'll pretend to agree with me about communism and then start arguing with me about white people being a nation of, I don't want to have that conversation. It's not a productive conversation. White people are not a nation, end of discussion. I debated Stefan Molyneux about communism. I debated Augustus Invictus about communism and a lot of things. But, like I looked over some of the previous debates Richard Spencer did, and I said, does anything productive come out of this conversation? No. He just wants to push this white separatist, white nationalist shit. And I mean, he would just use the debate to try and push his beliefs into my milieu, and I don't want to hear that. I don't want to help that happen. I've said over and over again why I oppose white nationalism. White people are not a nation, period, end of discussion. So, I mean, and I will not take every opportunity I get. I try to take as many opportunities as I get. I try to go on as many podcasts as I can, have as many debates as I can. But honestly, sometimes I will get an offer and I'll just go, not best use of my time. But I'm not opposed to going on Tucker Carlson. I'm not opposed to going on Fox News. I mean, you make the decision based on what you think is best at the time, what will best advance the revolutionary movement, right? And right now, Afghanistan communist era. Right now, going on Tucker Carlson, Jimmy Dora's done it, Max Blumenthal, Afghanistan communist era. It's been a beneficial thing to do. It's been good for them, right? So I'm not opposed. All right. Pineapple pizza. I hate pineapple. I don't like pineapple by itself. So why would I like it on pizza? Some people really like that, right? I think my wife, she really likes that pineapple pizza, the Hawaiian pizza. I don't like pineapples at all. It's my least favorite fruit. Something about the flavor of pineapple, I just don't like it. Just don't like it. I like oranges. I like apples. I like lemons. I like other citrus fruits, but pineapple, no. All right. Now, are you euphoric about the state of the USA now? No, I'm not. I'm not. I love my country. I love my fellow Americans. I love the people living here, and I see how bad things are getting, how insecure things are. I'm not euphoric about this situation. And it's very important that we not celebrate the suffering of our country folk. The people here in the United States are suffering. Are we happy about that? No, we should be angry about it. We should be angry about it. Now, we have the answer, and people are going to be more apt to hear our answer. So that's something we can recognize as a good thing. But we should not be happy about the conditions that our class. I'm not happy that there's a big line outside the food bank church near my house. I'm not happy about that. Not happy about that at all. Not happy to see, to see women, I'm seeing more prostitution in this city than ever before. And it's, sex worker rights, full legalization, decriminalize it, but the fact that a lot of this sex worker stuff I'm seeing in New York City is coming from a place of desperation. And that's not right. I'm seeing more of that around the city, seeing homeless people. I'm not happy about this. I'm not happy about this. I am not happy about this. I'm not happy about people losing their homes. Not happy about people losing their jobs. Not happy about people being hungry. Not happy about the crime rate going up. Not happy about the infrastructure crumbling. I am not happy about this stuff. No siree Bob. I am not happy about it. And we shouldn't be. PSL is a former Marcyite group. If you want to learn all about the Sam Marcy tendency, go to my YouTube channel. I have a video, The Legend of Sam Marcy, and that's where I talk about who Sam Marcy was and what Sam Marcy's beliefs in American politics were. You can check that out. You can learn more about it. Learn more about it and check it out. And, Sam Marcy, it's important. If you're a leftist in the United States, especially if you're a tanky in the United States, Sam Marcy had an impact on the political milieu that you're in. The Trotskyite who started his own group that kind of never would, moved out of the Trotskyite milieu, but still kind of thought they were Trotskyists. And, the Workers' World Party, and now they've divided into like 5 different groups. The Workers' World Party, which I was in for 8 years. There's the PSL, the Party of Socialism and Liberation. There's the Socialist Unity Party, Struggle La Lucha. There's the Communist Workers League based in Detroit. There's the, the New Orleans Workers Group, it's called, which is led by Gabrielle Gemma. There's about 5 different Marcyite parties in the United States. And, it's a big deal, among tankies, right? The tanky milieu, the anti-imperialist leftists, right? It's a big deal. And I never met Sam Marcy. He died in 1998, when I was a small kid. But Marxism is a very influential school of thought. I don't agree with Marxism, okay? And I'll tell you, I am not a Marxist. I disagree with the Marcyite tendency. I have some vehement disagreements with their worldview. I do stick to their anti-imperialism and their belief that imperialism is the greatest enemy, and I believe with that. And there's some things, like they stuck to some kind of 1930s economic analysis. I respect that. But other than that, there you go. Alexander the Great, well, he was vicious to the Persians. His crimes against the Persian people were horrendous. I don't endorse that. But he did, to some degree or other, try to forward, advance, science. He did very much try to lay the basis for economic development, the building of cities. So I can respect him on some level, but he's a guy building an empire. So there you go. All right. Why are there not as many Protestant socialists as there are Catholics? Well, the Catholic Church, you have to remember, officially opposes capitalism. Most Protestant churches do not. And that the Protestant Reformation was largely, it was very much simultaneous with the capitalist revolution that overthrew feudalism. And, the Protestant ideology in a lot of ways was a justification for the ripping apart of feudalism, which the Catholic Church was a big part of. There's a lot more anti-capitalist theology in all Catholicism than there is in the Protestant Church. There were a lot of Protestant socialists over the years. And, Francis Bellamy, who wrote the Pledge of Allegiance, was a Protestant socialist and a Baptist minister. There were plenty of them. But yes, there were more Catholics because Catholic theology, it is written into statements by the Pope and official Catholic theology, criticism of capitalism. Whereas Protestantism, largely as a form of Christianity, emerged to justify the emergence of capitalism. So that's why. Now, I am a Protestant and I'm a socialist, but, you know, I know for historical reasons that there are not as many of us. So there you go, right? And I mean, also you have to remember that liberation theology in Latin America was such a big deal that created an opening, for a lot of things. Latest oil news. What are the oil prices? For a while, the oil prices were very high, I think, right? Wasn't there a lot of, weren't oil prices pretty high as things were opening up all of a sudden? I think, there was, I haven't followed, the latest news. I haven't been reading the Wall Street Journal like I normally do, but I believe oil prices, gas prices were pretty high coming out of the pandemic. It was part of that inflation that Biden was getting raked over the coals for, if I'm not mistaken, right? We got oil prices that are very high right now. Thin blue line people, how do you reach them with socialism? Again, win them over to the class struggle message and get them involved in the class struggle. Get them involved in the class struggle, and they'll see it with their own eyes. You don't have to teach it to them. A lot of times people have to learn things for themselves. You don't teach people things by grabbing them and shaking them and shouting at them. That doesn't work. But if you can win people to get involved in the class struggle, people that are brainwashed by this idea that the police never commit brutality and never do anything wrong, if you can get them involved in the class struggle, get them involved in some community struggles against banks and against corporations, let them see it for themselves. That's the best way to wake people up. That's the best way to wake people up. All right. Deportations under Stalin. Well, my understanding is that during World War II, the Soviet Union adopted a policy of moving people around the Soviet Union on the basis of their nationality. And that was done for strategic reasons. The Chechens, there was a pro-Nazi insurgency among the Chechens, so they deported all the Chechens out of that region so they could crush the pro-Nazi insurgency. Jews were moved around the Soviet Union to prevent them from being captured, because if the Nazis captured Jews, they would take them to concentration camps or just kill them. There were a lot of cases where they slaughtered thousands of Jewish people in synagogues, etc. So, people were being moved around the Soviet Union. Okay, 27 million people died in the Soviet Union in World War II. 27 million. That is not a small number, okay? When you have a situation where that many people are dying and a country is fighting for its life, people are going to be moved around on the basis of, their nationality. People may not want to be moved around. And in that kind of situation, with that much death and killing going on, where you're fighting the most ruthless, evil mass murderers in history, the Nazis, in that circumstance, I can imagine that there's a lot of things that are happening that are very wrong, shouldn't happen, that obviously, under any other circumstances, you wouldn't even consider. You don't want to think about what the Soviet Union did. What they went through during World War II is beyond any horror we can imagine. Beyond any horror that we can even dream of. Okay? So, did the Soviet Union during World War II implement policies of moving people around on the basis of their nationality, moving nationalities away from the regions they had inhabited for thousands of years? Yep, they did. That happened. And the Nazis invaded, and 27 million people died, and that happened. And, Stalingrad, that happened. And the Soviet Union's kicked the Nazis' ass and raised the red flag over Berlin. That happened. So, yeah, these things happened. I mean, the way it is told in American media doesn't quite give it proper context, but these things did happen, yes, and they were awful. And no one thinks it was justified. And no one sits there and goes, oh, yeah, that should have happened. No. But look at the context, folks. It's a context that you and I never want to be in. People were making decisions that you and I would never want to make in a million years. All right. Are there ideologies that are like Marxism but idealist? Well, I mean, what do you mean like Marxism? Christianity, you could say, is like Marxism but idealist. But what do you mean like Marxism? I mean, there's no class struggle in the Christian ideology. Um, in some degree or other, all ideologies are similar. Ideologies, give people a purpose. They have an explanation of human history. Um, I don't know. I don't know. An ideology that is like Marxism but idealist. How is it? In some ways, all ideologies are similar, and in some ways, all ideologies are different. So I don't even know. Is the person trying to get at fascism, right? Are they talking about George Sorel and how George Sorel argued about the power of myth and was arguing for the class struggle on the basis of mysticism? There's an element there. And George Sorel, mind you, all these people who want to talk about red browns and all this stuff, read George Sorel, right? That's some red brown stuff. The Sorelian pessimism that entered the socialist movement, that laid the basis for the ideological foundations for Mussolini and a lot of that stuff. If you're interested in connections between the left and the right, look at Sorelianism and look at where George Sorel broke with Marxism, right? How he introduced the idea that there was no truth, that you could build a workers' movement on the basis of mythology, right? The legend of the monarchy, the legend, the way he argued that we should be pessimistic, we should look to the past, we should reject optimism, is OWK's Fundamental of MLism mandatory reading. I just recently discovered, I went to the same school building as him. Who is OWK? Who is OWK? I don't know who that is. But I recommend that book. There's Fundamentals of Marxism, Leninism. There's two books by that title. One was published in the 1980s by Line of March. And then there was one that was published, it's like a Soviet textbook. I read the Soviet textbook. If that's the Soviet textbook, then that's the one I read. But it's good. I recommend it. But is it a must read? I've read it, but it's not like the most important book to read. But it's an important book. Those textbooks are really good. I would recommend people read those textbooks. Right? Before you read the classics, read the textbooks. Learn the concepts before you dig into the polemical texts that are very hard to get through. Read the history of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, history of the Three Internationals by William Z. Foster. These texts are very important, right? They give you the overview with which you can then study the specifics. Use value versus truth value. I think what this person is asking about is, Marxism talks about surplus value and how workers are not paid the true value of their labor. And one critique, it's the critique that Peter Kropotkin made and others made, is that how can you really determine the value of something, right? There's the monetary value. Workers are not getting the monetary value of what they put into the product and out of its final price. They're not getting the percentage that they put into the product out of its final price. They're not getting because the capitalist needs to make profits. Okay, that part is true, but how do you determine the true value of anything? Well, that's a spiritual and philosophical question, right? At the end of the day, Marxism is dealing with the fact that what the product is sold for, the percentage of the product's final price that comes from the value of the worker is not paid the full value of their labor, right? It's simply a mathematical understanding. It's not a spiritual, philosophical question. What is the true value of anything, right? There you go. Afghanistan during the communist era. Well, it was a very poor country. The Soviet Union tried to bring some agricultural development in. There were mass literacy campaigns to teach women how to read. They tried to reforest the country. They had this group called the Democratic Youth League that was a mobilization of young people to try and rebuild the country to some degree or other. Very poor, fighting a civil war against the Mujahideen. At the same time, there was also the issue with, the fact that there was an ultra leftist faction in the party that was trying to have full socialism when the country wasn't ready for it and was trying to undermine the Soviet Union. It's very complicated, but yes, many people recognize that was the most hopeful time in Afghan history, as when the People's Democratic Party was in power. There was a lot of optimism there. And to be fair, the People's Democratic Party held out. The Soviet Union stopped supporting them, but they held out for a couple more years. They had that much support on the ground, which is really saying something. So there you go. On that note, folks, we're going to end the show. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression, with the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. Jay Grimes, I just answered that. I can't, The danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared. Revolution is the main trend in the world today. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. Good night, folks.